All right, good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. Welcome back. I'd like to welcome a new face, Victoria. Welcome. See everybody. Welcome back. You don't need to hear double talk. Okay. A couple of housekeeping. Next week, we begin our new JLI course, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. I mentioned this last night. This is one of the most fascinating courses I've ever taught. We're going to explore 1,000 years of history through the lenses of rabbinic responsa. Just fascinating stories and understanding the evolution of Jewish tradition. A lot of what we observe today is evolved from rabbinic responsa. So please join us for that. For women only, tomorrow evening, the New Moon gathering. This month is a sound bath. And that's it for now. Okay. So we're doing something a little different. We're actually going to be studying a tract on prayer. It's a different type of discourse, but hopefully it'll flow in a similar way. Every lesson will have stuff that you can extrapolate and incorporate into your life. But it is a focus on prayer. I'm gonna read the introduction before we get to chapter 1, so that we have context for this discourse, and then we'll jump in. So this was written by the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber of Lubavitch. So this is an introduction by the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who actually on the 28th, on the 28th, we have a speaker here in honor of the anniversary of the passing of the previous Rebbe and the day that the Rebbe became Rebbe. We have a speaker, Rabbi Eliezri, who also has a new book called Undaunted, where he talks about the fascinating life of the previous Rebbe and tremendous self-sacrifice. So the previous Rebbe writes as follows: By my holy and revered father and teacher, leader of Israel, pride of Jacob, tree of life, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber of Lubavitch, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing. His soul rests in the hidden heights. May his merit protect us and all of Israel. Presented to myself, so the 5th Rebbe wrote this to, he gave this to the previous Rebbe as director and acting headmaster of Yeshivas Tomchei Tmimim, which are the Chabad Yeshiva system, which the 5th Rebbe initiated. May our stronghold bless and guard them on behalf of the student body. In the presence of the distinguished rabbis and spiritual mentors, the Chassid and Oved, the one who, and Oved is one who not just serves God, but serves God specifically through prayer. Rabbi Chanoch Hendel of blessed memory was appointed over the study body in Lubavitch, and his adjunct, the Chassid and Maskil. He was a Maskil is one who's more focused on the intellectual teachings of Hasidic philosophy. Rabbi Shmuel Gronim of blessed memory, who was appointed over the student body in Zhembin in the district of Minsk. In the beginning of Teves, in the year 5666 from creation, which is about the early 1900s, I transcribed it from his holy handwritten manuscript, arranged it into chapters, and added summaries on the evening of his first yahrzeit, the 2nd of Nisan, 5681, 1921, in Rostov-on-Don. So that's the intro. We're going to dig in a little deeper. The yeshiva, Tomchei Tmimim, I guess a little context. We are all familiar with a typical school system today. And in the Jewish world, there's the yeshiva system. The yeshiva system, as we know it today, is an evolution. In the earlier on, people would study in small groups. There were some yeshivas. The Chabad yeshiva was instituted in 1864, 65, I think, somewhere around there. And the intention of the 5th Rebbe was to blend together the teachings of Talmud and the revealed parts of Torah with the secret parts of Torah, that should become fused together. So he says like this: the yeshiva was founded on Sunday, the 15th of Elul, 5657. 5657 is actually 1897. During its first year, approximately 20 students between the ages of 18 and 20 years old were enrolled. So gesund. All were exceptionally talented and were highly proficient in numerous Talmudic topics with the commentaries. They were far from having attained an understanding of Chassidut, of the mystical teachings of Torah in general, and of matters pertaining to the divine service according to the lifestyle of Chassidut in particular. In the administration of the yeshiva's founder and president, my revered and saintly father, enacted a regulation declaring that any young, God-fearing person capable of studying independently was to be admitted as a student in the yeshiva, whether he was from Hasidic stock of Chabad, Poland, or Volhynia, or was from Germany, which were the seathold of the opposition to Hasidic philosophy. His parentage was irrelevant. So the Rebbe's arms were open to welcome anybody who was a worthy student. Now, during the periods scheduled for Nigla study, I'll give you a little context. So when I studied in yeshiva, we would start the morning class started at 7:30 a.m. and went till 9 a.m. Then we had a half-hour break to prepare for prayer. Prayer was from 9:30 to 10:30. 10:30 was breakfast. It was very important that we had breakfast. And at 11 o'clock, from 11 until 6, I believe, we studied Talmudic topics. So we studied Talmud for 3 hours at a class in Talmud study. Then we studied Talmud again, but a much more peripheral study of Talmud. And then we studied the Code of Jewish Law. Sure. Talmud is the compendium of the oral tradition. So the Torah was given both the written Torah and the oral law, and the oral law was put onto paper or onto parchment around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, about 2,000 years ago. And the Mishnah is the basic collection of all of oral tradition. For the next roughly 500 years, the rabbis in Babylonia and in Israel analyzed the Mishnah, debated the Mishnah, and finally, around the year 500, the Talmud was completed, both the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. For the next 500 years was the era of the Gaonim. The Gaonim were rabbis mostly in the Middle East who continued to decipher the Talmud and give us practical application in Jewish law. And then we entered into the 1,000 years between the year 1000 and present time, where actually the course that I mentioned, Rabbinic Responsive, became the dominant in defining what the actual practice is. You can see, so after we studied the Code of Jewish Law, we had a break for dinner, and then we studied Hasidic philosophy again. So it was a smaller portion of the day, maybe 30% of the day, that we studied Hasidic philosophy, but the idea was that would infuse the teachings of the revealed parts of Torah with the deeper understanding of Jewish mysticism, the deeper meaning of these teachings of the revealed part of Torah. Now, during the period scheduled for revealed Torah, Talmud and its legal interpreters, each student would concentrate on a subject of his choice without direction from a teacher or tutor. But 2 Hasidic elders of the Hasidic fraternity were entrusted with the responsibility for overseeing the study of Chassidut, mysticism in general. In particular, they were accountable for anything related to the inward guidance of their students in the area of service of the heart, this is prayer, along with its effects on the development of commendable character traits consonant with Hasidic doctrine. So this is a very important paragraph. The study of Torah was not intended for it to just be a collection of ideas. The study of Torah is intended to impact our lives so that we are better people. How do we become better people? We become better people by looking at our character traits. negative character traits, to work on transforming them, and to nurture our positive character traits. Now, when you study Talmud, you're dealing with very physical, material things. Classic is one of the tractates in the Talmud begins with an ox that gores a cow, and a baby is found next to the cow, right? The analysis is whether the baby belongs to the cow or now it belongs to the one that caused the damage, and how you divide up the financial obligations that the owner of the ox has, and so on and so forth, and many other such examples throughout the Talmud. It's a deeply intellectual pursuit. It's very profound. It's very fascinating, but because one is approaching the study of Talmud and in general the revealed parts of Torah primarily through the self-intellect, meaning my intellect, how do I understand it, and how do you understand it, and we debate, it's very liable to feed the ego. I'm a really smart guy, and I make really good arguments, and I really understand a lot of Talmud. It's susceptible to feeding ego. But that's where God's will is found. As we discussed in many discourses, the observance of God's commandments is found through Jewish law. So, but we got to balance that out. And in fact, in that time, there were many great Torah scholars who actually took advantage of the knowledge that they had gained and used that to lord themselves over the simple Jew, the ignorant Jew, and they, which was one of the introductions of Hasidic philosophy, beginning with the Baal Shem Tov, to help elevate the simple Jew to say that God wants the heart, and it's about the sincerity. And this is already 6-7 generations later, where the yeshiva system is established, and the objective is to help develop the students to have good character. So in the yeshiva system, until this very day, there's something called a mashpia. We have a mashkiach and a mashpia. Does anybody know what a mashkiach is? What's a mashkiach? So the word, that's correct. So today we use the term mashkiach generally for someone who supervises a kitchen, a plant that manufactures food, to make sure that the food is kosher. But the word mashkiach means to observe. And in the yeshiva system, the mashkiach's job is to make sure the students are behaving, that they show up on time, they go to sleep on time, and so on and so forth. That while they're sitting in the yeshiva hall, that they're actually studying and they're not just chatting, and so on. But then you have a mashpia. The word mashpia means to give flow. I know flow is a popular thing today. To give flow, but it means to transmit from themselves to the student the guidance that the student needs to work on their character. So you might loosely call that a mentor. And the job of the mentor is to help develop the student, not so much in their study, but to develop the student in their character. So these two teachers that were referenced here, that was their job. Primary responsibility was delegated to the Chassid and Oved Reb Chanoch Handel of blessed memory, who arrived in the city of Lubavitch in the year 5603, and who had attended Chassidim of great stature. He was entrusted with supervising the study of Chassidut and with guiding the Tomchei Tmimim students in Lubavitch. His adjunct, the Chassid and Moscow Reb Shmuel Gronim of blessed memory, former student of the famous Reb Avram of blessed memory from Zhemben, was entrusted with supervising the study of Chassidut and with guiding the Tomchei Tmimim students in the city of Zhemben in the district of Minsk. During the years 5658, 5659, which would correspond to 1850, 1898, and 1899, thank God, a significant number of students were accepted at the yeshiva, and may they increase. In the course of these 2 years, the result of the guidance supplied by the aforementioned venerable Chassidim the spiritual mentors and counselors became evident. For with the kindness of God, the students had acquired an understanding of Chassidut and the modes of service based on its teachings. The godly menorah, which is a metaphor for the students in the institution, may our stronghold bless and guard them, had begun to illuminate its surrounding as well. What I find this fascinating, and perhaps you will as well, the world of Chabad today is okay. So what does this mean, Medarv Zayin Andersh? At moments, all of us probably experience this feeling, things got to be different. I'm not showing up the way I want to show up. I want to be a better person. I want to navigate that particular character flaw. I want to be a better husband, a better parent, a better friend, a better coworker, a nicer person, and so on. So that feeling that we have to want to be different, how do we actually create that change? So that's what this is all about. These events transpired in quick succession, which in unison exerted remarkable influence over Anash, over the Hasidic community collectively, drawing them closer to the service of heart, that is prayer, accompanied by meditation and deliberation. What are the three events? Number one, the establishment of the yeshiva, the studies of the students, the guidance they received in their conduct. Number two, the discourse Hecholzu, which was delivered during Simchas Torah 56-59, which would have been 1898. The discourse focuses on the task of a person in distancing himself from wicked traits and implanting in oneself positive ones. This could be achieved by means of systematic service, devoid of self-delusion, through the study of Chassidut in general and the involvement of prayer in particular. That's the second event. And the third is the inspired talk that my saintly father delivered on Simchas Torah the following year. In his address, he explained how the soul descends for the purpose of engaging in the divine service, of purifying and refining one's natural emotive traits. For each person to accomplish all this, he explained, is possible only through the service of prayer. Many of Anash and the students were then motivated to apply themselves to service through prolonged prayer, and the number of determined inquirers into these matters grew. This explains the author's holy words at the beginning of this discourse. Quote, since so many members of Anash have been inquiring and seeking how to pray with proper devotion and in what way to serve God through service of the heart, this is prayer, aside from being readily comprehensible, having been arranged in a style that enables each member of Anash and every student to study and to understand it, this discourse, known as Kuntras HaTfilah, the tract on prayer, is also a good companion. It assists the reader in searching for, finding, and examining all aspects of every sort of evil that blemish and afflict man, both the wicked and despicable traits that are glaring as well as those that are concealed. It points a finger at their seminal cause and at everything that derives from them. The tract on prayer is a definitive guide to finding a balm and remedy for the maladies of the soul and to developing one's faculties and abilities through genuine service. Let me read that last paragraph again. So this tract that we're about to begin to study is a definitive guide to finding a balm and remedy for the maladies of the soul and to developing one's faculties and abilities through genuine service. Who doesn't want that? Right? Okay. One more page and then we jump into the discourse. Since so many members of Anash have been inquiring and seeking how to pray with proper devotion and in what way to serve God through service of the heart, this is prayer, I have decided to expound on the subject based on the writing of our venerable forebears, Their words are those of God our Lord, established forever, living and pertinent nowadays as in days gone by. Only a reminder of their words is necessary, and an awakening of the hearts of Anash regarding them. Also, emphasis needs to be given to those matters relevant to addressing the conditions of the present times, times in which spiritual sensitivity has diminished. Right? This was written 100 years, 125 years ago. It's how much more so today. These latter matters too are contained in their holy words, for an abundance of goodness and much illumination are cloaked within them. From the treasury of their sacred writings, we need only to uncover this goodness to the extent we are able, in order to illuminate and awaken our souls to walk in their light, the light of the fountainhead of true life. For their entire aspiration and soulful desire was to enliven and illuminate us with the true light and vitality. Truly, they sacrificed their very lives to this end, as is known to all who are even minimally familiar with their biographies. We need but to cleave to our venerable forebearers, to their holy words, and to become vessels to receive the goodly light within our souls, within their radiance. We shall ascend higher and higher as God desires, through the teachings and guidance of his venerable servants of blessed memory. May their merit protect us. Okay, that's our introduction. Any questions on the intro? L'chaim. Okay, yeah. Now I'm going to start right now. Right? That I read just from my book. By the way, at the end of the class today, if you are interested in purchasing the actual book, I will place an order so that we have them for next Sunday. You can write down your name. We're going to charge the book charge, which is probably $20 or so, and you can have your own book, take it home, review, and so on and so forth. But I will continue to make photocopies as we go on. So maybe I'll just take a minute and talk about prayer in general. So prayer, as we know it, has a structure to it. There's a prayer book. The prayer book was instituted by the men of the Great Assembly before the destruction of the Second Temple. The prayer book was never intended to become a ritual. What do I mean by a ritual? What I mean is that it never was meant to be rote. It's not just a bunch of words that we get up every morning and we mumble or even say them and get through them. Prayer was meant to be a platform through which we, in praying, take time to contemplate the meaning of the prayers, apply them to ourselves, and use them as a format for us to do what was mentioned in the introduction, to work on our character. Prayer is a format for us to ask God for our needs, but I'll give you an interesting, there was an essay written by a man whose name was Rabbi Cheskel Fagin, fondly known as Chacha Fagin. Yecheskel Fagin was burned by the Nazis in a synagogue somewhere in Poland towards the beginning of the war. He was a great Hasidic teacher, and he posed the following question. There was a publication that came out prior to the war. It was known as Hatamim. Hatamim was a publication that had it had essays on Talmud, it had essays on Jewish law, it had essays on Hasidic philosophy, it had stories of original Hasidim. It was written by the yeshiva students and edited actually by the previous Rebbe and by the Rebbe. The Rebbe at the time was in France, and they would send the Rebbe the publications, and the Rebbe edited them. So there's an essay in there by this man, Chacha Fagin, and he poses the following question. In Jewish law, one is prohibited to do anything in the morning before prayer. You're even prohibited to study Torah. And yet, in the yeshiva system, in the Chabad yeshiva system, the first thing we do in the morning is we study Torah, specifically Hasidic philosophy. And the question is, isn't that a violation of the law that says, the halacha that says that you can't do anything before prayer? So in order to answer this, he says, what's prayer? Is prayer merely asking for our needs? There's a story, another great chassid who was a little bit of a comedian. He was a holy comedian. His name was Reb Shmuel Munkes. Reb Shmuel Munkes, he would, many stories about his comedy, but an example of a comedic act that he would do is one day they were coming into, he was a student of he was a follower of the first of the Chabad Rebbes, the Alter Rebbe, And one day they came into the yeshiva, into the Rebbe's synagogue, and he was hanging by the entrance of the door. I don't know exactly how he hung himself, but he was hanging at the entrance of the door. And the Hasidim said, like, what's this all about? Why are you hanging here? So he said, if you go to a shoemaker, right, the shoemaker hangs their shoes outside to demonstrate that they're a shoe shop. You go outside the butcher, there's a piece of meat hanging. If you want to know what a Rebbe is, you got to look, there's a chassid hanging. So this was Shmuel Munkes. So why was I going to tell you about Shmuel Munkes?
Not what is prayer? Read Torah, pray.
Yeah, I don't know why I was going to tell you about Shmuel Munkes. It'll come back to me. Anyway, so Chacha Fagan. So the story with Shmuel Munkes. Thank you. Shmuel Munkes was once in a village. So there's a Jewish practice that the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, we get up at midnight and we recite prayers of supplication, prayers of asking God for forgiveness. In the Sephardic community, they do it the entire month before Rosh Hashanah. In the Ashkenazi community, we begin on the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, and then subsequently early mornings, Monday, Tuesday, until whenever Rosh Hashanah is, we get up early, and before the morning prayer, we say these prayers of asking God for forgiveness to kind of get us into the mindset of Rosh Hashanah. So Shmuel Munkes was in this village, and he stayed at the home of a couple that were farmers. They had a farm, they had a cow. So in the middle of the night, they come knocking at his door. They didn't know who he was, that he was this great chassid. They come knocking at his door and they say, "Sir, you got to get up. We're going to the synagogue to pray now." So he says, "It's the middle of the night. Leave me alone. Let me sleep." So they're knocking. "Come on, you got to get up." He says, "Why are you going now, middle of the night, to go pray?" They said, "We're going to pray because Rosh Hashanah is coming." So he says, "So we can pray in the morning. What do you need to get up in the middle of the night?" "Well, we got to ask God for our needs." He says, "What do you need?" He says, "We need that the field should produce good produce. We need the cows should give good milk." And he says to them, "Shame on you, an elderly couple, getting up in the middle of the night to go ask God for milk." So he was conveying a message. Prayer is not about, the prayers before Rosh Hashanah is not about asking God for milk. And prayer just, God, make sure the business deal gets closed good today? Is that what we're praying for? Is that what prayer is about? I'm not saying we don't have needs, but is that what our real need is? That we should have our material things taken care of? What's the real need that we have? Why do we have material needs? What's our purpose in our material needs in the first place? And in order to know what our purpose is in the material needs, we need to know what our purpose is. And until we know what our purpose is, we can't really pray for our material needs in an authentic way. Think about it. You get up in the morning and you stand in front of God and you say, "God, make sure the steak has got a good cut. Make sure the milk isn't spoiled. My coffee goes down well." I mean, is that what we're doing? We're going in front of God asking for all of these things? It seems very trivial. I remember a fellow who once, his business was doing very well. I said, "You got to make sure to thank God. You got to pray to God for success." He said, "I don't want to bother God with my problems." So I said, "God, that's what God is for." But really the question is, what do we need success for? What is this all about? I mean, if we're going to talk about character, you think about a given day. We run around, we're busy with things, we're busy with our children, we're busy with our business, with our work. We're taking care of irritating problems that come up, a pipe bust, right? Our car needs an oil change. This is life. What's that all about? We're busy with all of these material things. What's it really all about? Yes. I'm sorry.
Gratitude, adoration. See all of those examples also in the Psalms. That far beyond capacity for material needs. What if there's a whole spectrum?
Sure.
Discourse, communication, and also receiving.
Yeah, so what you're saying is correct. Prayer is not just about asking for our needs. In fact, if you look in the morning prayer and you start from the beginning, there's actually no specific request for needs until you get to the Amida, into the time of prayer where we stand and we have 19 blessings where we ask God for our needs. And actually, of the 19, six of them are not actually asking God for our needs, they're praise of God. So actually, in all of prayer, there's 13 blessings that ask for needs. And then after the Amida, we have really one section that asks God for our needs, which is the section of asking God for forgiveness. So, but one might, in other parts of prayer, reflect on what their personal needs are. So the answer to the first question that Rabbi Chacha Fagan asks is the answer to the second question: what is the rest of prayer really all about? And his answer is that the biblical obligation to pray is to pray for our needs. But because we just established that our needs are much more than our material needs, in other words, why do I need all of these material things? I need these material things so that I can serve God. Do you know where we learned prayer from? Does anybody know? It's a story from Tanakh. Take a guess. Anybody? One of the most famous prayers in the Torah. Samuel's mother. Very good. Hannah. Were you going to say that? So the story of Hannah, Samuel's mother Hannah. So we read this in the Tanakh, where Hannah and Penina were married to a man named Elkanah, and Penina had many children. Hannah did not. She was not blessed with children, and Penina would provoke her. Commentaries tell us he provoked her in order to get her to show up at the tabernacle, at the Mishkan, to pray. And she resisted, and finally she went to the Mishkan. And the Torah tells us the story of how she came into the Mishkan and she was praying. And she was praying in a manner that caused the high priest, Eli, to think that she was drunk. Interesting. You would think that a drunk would be making a lot of noise. Actually, her prayer was very quiet. And he found that strange. And he said to her, drunks are not allowed here. And she said, I'm not drunk, but I'm a mother in pain. And she said that she was praying to God that she should be blessed with a child. And in her prayer, she promised God that if she was blessed with a child, that she would dedicate him to the service of God. And indeed, when he was weaned at 24 months, she brought her child, Samuel, to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, and he became one of the greatest prophets. The Midrash tells us what her prayer was. She said to God the following. She said, God, I'm not leaving here until you grant my request. That's a big gauntlet to throw down with God. But our sages say that her prayer worked. Now, don't try this at home, because you're not Hannah. Why did her prayer work? Basically, what she said to God was, you put me on this earth to serve you. And unless I have the things that I need to serve you, I can't fulfill my purpose. Now, if you can say that authentic, go for it. But if you can't say that authentically, I wouldn't start up with God. In other words, what she was saying is, what do I need these things for? Not for me. I have no need for them. You have a need for them, God. You put me on this earth. So because you have a need for them, therefore you need to provide them for me. Otherwise, I can't fulfill my purpose. There's a Hasidic saying that God makes something from nothing so that we can take something and turn it into nothing or nothingness. In other words, what is our whole purpose of being on this physical earth? So that God gives us material and we use the material in the service of God. We turn it into the spiritual. We uncover the godliness that's within it. So Chacha Fagan says that since the obligation to pray, the biblical obligation to pray is to pray for our needs, and because our needs are surely much more than just the materialism of the material, so we have to study the Hasidic philosophy first so that we can have a relationship with God, so we can build this connection to God, to understand what our purpose is here in the first place, so that our relationship with the material world around us is real. Which also brings us to what the rest of prayer is. It's an opportunity for us to deeply connect with God, so that during the rest of the day, we can actually find God in everything that we're doing. And the discourse is going to develop that. Now, the punchline of all this, which really builds on some of the discourses we recently studied, is that the journey to serving God is not just to take a physical item and make a blessing on it. It's to, what's the difficulty in our engagement in the physical, whether it's relationship with our spouses or our children or the workplace or money or health or so on. What's the real challenge that we have with it? The challenge is us. I don't mean to beat up on us, but the challenge is us. We have limitations. We have blockages. We have stuff that prevents us from showing up in life fully as God wants us to. So the more we work on ourselves, the more we work on our character, recognizing our character shortcomings, recognizing our strengths, the more we're able to show up in life fully. And I suspect that that's the pursuit that all of us really have. We want to be able to show up in life fully. The totality of who we are, to show up in every experience. The goal is not to minimize or diminish any of our experiences. In other words, everything you did last week, you should do this week. But you should do it being more present in the doing. And what does it mean to be more present? To recognize that we're here for a purpose. And that it's our own character flaws that prevent us from showing up fully. Just to qualify this, we may never fully transform those character flaws. That's okay, because each of us are here for a unique journey. And included in that journey is the way God made you and the way God made me. And not just how we came out of the womb, but also the stories of our lives, right? We have a much greater awareness today, but the stories of our lives, the narrative that we have, the parents that raised us, the homes that we grew up in, the choices that we've made along the way, the things that shaped us into the person that we are, those are the things that shape our character. Those are the things that get in the way, and those are the things that fuel and propel us to showing up in the world as fully as we need. So unless we have the ability to look deeply at ourselves, we can't really show up in life fully. So prayer is the laboratory. Prayer is the format in which we are afforded the opportunity to navigate deeply into ourselves, to understand ourselves vis-a-vis the purpose that God put us here. Now, one more qualifier before we jump in. Our sages say that love covers over the self. What does that mean? That when you love someone, you're going to make excuses for them, right? The teacher calls and says, your kid did this and that in school, and your first response is, yeah, they were really tired. They had a rough night last night. You know, they're working through something. They've got impulse control issues. You know, they're maybe a little autistic or ADD or ADHD. We right away come up with excuses. You know who else we make excuses for? Who do we make excuses for? Ourselves, right? In that mimer, in the discourse that he references of Heichotzu, the second intro, in the second intro there, he says something interesting, that if somebody says to you, you know, by the way, you got this and this flaw, you're going to tell them you have no clue. You're going to jump down the throat of the other person. But when you're alone and you look in the mirror, you know exactly that they're on the money. But to the other person, you don't want them to think for a second that they know you that well. But to ourselves, we know our shortcomings. Well, I would say we know some of our shortcomings, because the love for ourselves conceals on our own shortcomings. which is why in the journey of life, hopefully we learn this sooner than later. Every now and then we get like a certain awareness. Something happens in our lives and we say, oh, yeah, I got to work on that, right? And you enter into a new state of consciousness. And then you think because I figured this out, now I've got it. Now I really know myself. And then a couple of years go by and you get a new awareness and you say, oh, wow, I thought I knew myself. Now I know myself. And then after you do that a couple of times, you say, I know nothing. I know a little bit about myself, but there's a lot more to know. How do we get to know ourselves more? The more time we spend with ourselves. And I don't mean that in a selfish way or hanging out at the spa, but the more time we spend reflecting, and particularly when we have good tools to reflect, we're able to get to know ourselves better. And again, the laboratory where this work takes place is in prayer. Now, we mentioned that prayer has a structure. It's the prayer book. But the prayer book is just a container for us to be able to do this work. Prayer is the container for us to do this work. And I'm saying that because while it's really important and helpful to use the structure of prayer, you don't have to be limited to it. I do encourage, and we'll have opportunities in the duration of this discourse to talk about it, to say prayers, to say the Shema, to say some of the Psalms, say them in English, say them in Hebrew, say them in whatever language you understand. But that's not the objective. The objective is not just to say the words, it's really to spend that time. And the more we get to understand and appreciate what the prayer book is, the more we're able to show up in prayer to be able to really reflect using the prayer book and the prayers that we say to be able to take that time to reflect within ourselves. And I call it work. Work is a very popular word today. You got to do the work. In Hebrew, work is called avoda. Say that word, avoda. In the Shema, we have the phrase, and you shall serve God with your heart. And our sages say, what is service of the heart? What does it mean to work with the heart, to do the work of the heart? The work of the heart is prayer. So if doing the work, which is the work of the heart, the work of the character, is the commandment of prayer, so prayer is all about doing this work of reflecting and navigating ourselves. Okay? Questions or comments on this before we jump in to chapter 1? Yes.
Laws that work on that are part of the tikkun or associates with tikkun?
Yeah, so let me first of all say what the word tikkun is. Tikkun means I'm going to say it in the way that I relate to it, because a lot of it is I think is misconstrued. Each of us have a unique purpose on this earth. And our purpose is defined when we fulfill our purpose, then tikkun means to fix or correct, but it actually means to complete, to make complete. When we are conscious of our unique journey, it's such a powerful point because we're very, very hard on ourselves about our flaws. And that itself paralyzes us from actually growing. We carry a lot of shame around our flaws, and it prevents us from growing. We feed the shame. And the truth is that all of our character flaws are perfectly designed for us and our purpose on this earth. So when we're ready to embrace that, then we can actually use them, and we can fix what needs to be fixed, and we can channel what needs to be channeled. But then we let go of the shame and we actually work with it. And it's very powerful when we are able to do that, to actually recognize that who I am in this moment is exactly as God intended for me to be. Then I can ask the question looking forward.
So prayer is a tool to transform shame.
Exactly.
So
Avodah means like service in the godly term, or is it like everyday working? I could term it as avodah, or is there another word for just working on that?
Good. So the Hebrew word technically, avoda, means any kind of work. Homework is called avodas habayis, the work at the home. That's what they give the kids in school, is avodat habayis. But work, ultimately, if we pray properly, even a little bit properly, then all of work becomes an expression of that. Because any interaction we do, the goal is not to spend the whole day praying. The goal is to get out there into the world and to live life, to live in the material world, to be in relationships, to deal with the material. As we learned in the prior discourse, that all the floodwaters, that's what it's about. It's about living life, but living life with purpose and meaning. And that starts with recognizing our role in that picture. Yes. You got to speak up a little bit.
To me, there's a lot of modeling prayer in songs. You think there's an awareness of this process of working with self and the soul. See that a lot in the songs.
Sure. King David epitomized that. Everywhere. All of Psalms is King David's personal journey and his relationship with God, and recognizing how he's showing up and where he's falling short.
Static declarations, the process.
Yeah. I'll give you one passage. Growing up in this world, as we study various different discourses, passages predominantly from prayer show up in the discourse as a reflection of the particular teaching. So one teaching that I particularly love, and when I pray, when I take the time to pray with intent, because it doesn't always happen, this particular passage really means a lot to me. So it's Psalm 146, I believe. It says, King David says, Teitzei ruchai, it says, Al tiftechu v'nedivim, don't put your trust in noblemen, b'ven adam she'ein lo yeshua, in the Son of Man that has no salvation. Why shouldn't you? He says, Teitzei rucha yashiv l'admasai, when his spirit leaves, he returns to the earth. B'yoyim avdu eshtaneisav, on that day, all of his machinations are gone. So, in a very simple way, what King David's saying is, don't put trust in humans. Humans, they die. And when they die, all the great plans are gone. But there's a deeper meaning. What is man? What is a human being? A human being is ruchai, it's his spirit. We're made up of body and soul. Everything is made up of body and soul. So when you sit down to eat a piece of steak, what is the steak? It's not the material. It's the divine energy that energizes the parts that make the steak a steak and gives it its flavor. So don't put your trust in the steak. Don't sit down to eat a steak because it's delicious and what's the spirit in the steak? Eat the steak, but what's the spirit in the steak? What's it really all about? It's a divine energy that we then consume and are energized by it. And everything in life, not just humans, are energized by this higher divine energy, but everything is energized through that. So why spend your time preoccupied with things that are superficial and finite and have shelf life when you can spend the same time being invested in things that are greater? And this is life, right? What happens in a relationship where your negative character flaw shows up and you act from that unhealthy place? And then you get this awareness, oops, I shouldn't have done that. What are you saying to yourself? I'm not acting as I should. Why does that bother you so much? Why should it bother us that we didn't show up in this relationship, in this moment, as we could have? At its core, it's because life is much more than this moment. It's not just about this interaction. This is about a relationship. And if I showed up in this relationship in an unhealthy way, I missed an eternal opportunity, which is also why we feel very good when we do show up properly, right? So this is a passage from Psalms, one passage from Psalms, that King David is reflecting on how he's showing up in life, how he's showing up in the world. And is he showing up with a divine consciousness, or is he showing up with a self-consciousness? By the way, another thing is that as we pray, and if we pray regularly, right? I've mentioned this many times that we're sitting in Jeff's place. It's a place of recovery. People in recovery have a spiritual practice, and they know that they have to engage in their spiritual practice every single day, or they're susceptible to using again. What's so important about the spiritual practice? First and foremost, what's important about the spiritual practice is that every day I'm anchoring myself. Every day I am working on living not on the surface. So whether it's meditation, whether it's an act of an act of reaching out to someone else in recovery, an act of prayer, going to the gym, all of these things compel us to say there's something more to life. I'm a chronic resolution making kind of person. Maybe this will resonate with you. You encounter a passage or a meditation and you say, I'm going to start every day with that, right? I just want to start every day with that. Now, it doesn't last very long, but conceptually, why do I want to start every day with that? Because I know that if I did start every day with that, I was actually recently listening to a meditation from fantastic meditation that I listen to every now and then, which basically describes the relationship between the soul and the body. So it's a great meditation. It basically explains that our consciousness, the fact that we are thinking about our body, means that we are not the body. If there's an I that's thinking about the body, then I am not the body, right? So there's two separate things. There's I that's thinking about the body. And by the way, I am using my brain to think about the body. So I'm not the brain either. There's an I that's using the brain to think about the body. And then there's the body. It's a very profound idea. So when you can accept that, then you begin to look at the body differently. And we, meaning I and my body, have a relationship in this world for as long as I'll be on it. I really like that meditation. And if I actually took the time every single morning to listen to that 15 meditation, you can be sure I would show up in the world differently. I'm not saying I would become a tzaddik, that I would become righteous, but by default, I would be a little bit more refined. I would be a little bit more in tune. So prayer, just by virtue of engaging in it on a daily basis, allows us to be a little bit more refined. And by the way, the more refined we are, the more we're able to look at ourselves honestly. The more we're preoccupied with ourselves, our self-interests, the harder it is to look at ourselves honestly. If you ever gone to a 12-step meeting, if you haven't, I recommend it. It's a humorous event. Because the people in recovery are the most self-deprecating people you'll meet, and they laugh at themselves. Why? Because they know that they can't take themselves too seriously. Because if you take yourself too seriously, you're going to use again, because the ego gets in the way. They take themselves, the real self, seriously, which is that they're here on this earth for a purpose, and they don't want to lose that life. But it's all that other stuff that we give so much value to, so much credence to, that prevents us from really living. It's like in the pursuit of living, we're preventing ourselves from living. Okay? We got this? Okay. Let's at least start. We only have 5 minutes left, but let's at least start the discourse here. Ahuvai achai v'rei, my beloved brethren and friends. Halo yadaitem. This is a borrowed term from the prophets. Do you not know? Im lo shemaitem, have you not heard? Harbe inyani hizbaininus, many contemplative themes. In other words, we know a lot of ideas that we can use to meditate on, some of which we've discussed in various different discourses. Hein be'inyan bechines memali kol, whether it is talking about God as he is present in this world, fills the world, asher kol maskil yachol lahaven hadavar la'ashrei, that every thinking person, every contemplative person has the capacity to fully understand this. Gam b'seichel hativi denefesh abhamis, also in the natural intellect of the animal soul. So, what is this? We've discussed in many discourses that there are two types of relationships that God has with the world. One is God as he fills the world, and one is God as he encompasses the world. God as he fills the world is God how every creation within the world is attended to according to its particular need. So this might sound weird, but run with it for a second. You imagine that you are energized by God. Now imagine God took the energy that he energizes me, and instead of energizing me with that energy, he energized you. You can imagine you'll feel very uncomfortable. Now you're saying that, you're thinking that as on a human level. I get this bearded rabbi's energy that's feeding into my body. That's weird. But imagine, not a human. Imagine if the mole rat, the energy that energizes the mole rat, suddenly showed up for you one day. Instead of your energy, you got the energy of a mole rat. Or conversely, if the mole rat got your energy, it would be really out of whack. Just first of all, in quantity, right? The quantity of energy that a human needs is different than the quantity of an energy that a mole rat needs. And the quality of the energy. A mole rat needs to scurry around and look in little holes to find food, or whatever mole rats do. Humans have a much more complex purpose. So we need human energy, not mole rat energy. And the same thing is true about vegetation and the angels and the spiritual worlds. Every part of creation is given a very particular energy in order to energize it so that it can fulfill its purpose on this earth. That's God as he fills the world. But then there's a dimension of God as he encompasses the world. God as he encompasses the world takes all of creation into one account. I create, period. That's a transcendent relationship that God has with all of creation. And because it's transcendent, by definition, we can't comprehend it. We can't relate to it. We can have faith in it. We can believe in it, but we can't relate to it. But the dimension of God that fills the world, not only the part that fills us, but that fills the stuff within our consciousness, and even within the spiritual realms, we can understand, we can relate to, and we can have a relationship with it. Do you accept that? Does anybody not accept that? Okay, and we've studied many discourses on this theme. The animal soul, who's thinking? When you're contemplating, who's contemplating? Is it your godly soul or is it your animal soul? What do you mean by depends? Okay, let's run with that. If you're contemplating a godly idea, so I'm going to beg to defer, and I'm going to tell you why. Where are you contemplating that idea? Where? Geographically in your body, your brain, neurologically, in your brain. In your brain and in your heart. Contemplation is a journey of brain and heart. That is part of your physical reality. The physical reality is not godly. That belongs to the animal soul, which is actually the very purpose that the brain and the heart live in the animal soul, because our job is to bring the animal soul on board. Now, what is enclosed in the thinking at the time, I would agree with you, is the godly soul. But the function, the tool, is the animal soul. And that's what he tells us is that the capacity to relate to God as he fills the world is a function of the animal soul and is within the capacity of the animal soul to understand through its natural intellect. In other words, you don't have to be a religious Jew or a rabbi with many years of contemplative experience to be able to internalize this principle that my animal soul has the capacity to have a relationship with God as he fills the world. And we're going to stop there. We'll pick it up next week. I'll send these down here. If you want a copy of the book, please write your name down and I will order them this week. I also want to share a piece of sad news, which I still don't have a lot of information. There's a fellow that's been coming to class, Darshan. Anybody know who I'm talking about, Darshan? Darshan was hit by a car and killed. His mother came by here. I was out of town. I spoke to her for a minute on the phone and she gave me her phone number. I've been trying to be in touch with her. But that's the story. So today's class is in his memory. It happened, I think, over the last week of the year. Yeah.
Was this a young black man?
Yeah. Yeah. The book is called The Tract on Prayer. Yeah. If I learn anything additional, I will share it. Oh.
To his mother, I don't know that.
Yeah. She said that this was a really important part of his life, so it is, very meaningful. Okay, you all have a great week. You can begin to work on this contemplation. You don't have to learn the whole discourse.